The launch of a new Samsung flagship is inevitably one of the biggest events of the year in the world of Android, and after the whole Note 7 thing, the Galaxy S8 has a lot to live up to. Let's jump into what we know so far. Let's start with the basics. What will the Galaxy S8 look like? Now, if you've been following Samsung's designs over the past couple of years, it shouldn't be a huge surprise to see them going with glass and metal again, and sure enough, we've seen renders to that effect in the past few days. Most interesting thing about these, which have been leaking out from Chinese social media and from case manufacturers, is that we don't see any buttons on the front. Samsung, it seems, has gone from capacitive buttons and a big clicky home button to just having on-screen buttons like everyone else. According to the rumor mill, Samsung is indeed going with a fingerprint scanner that's built into the display, and that's kind of interesting in itself because it means how are you necessarily going to find that by touch? Not as easy with something that's under the screen compared to a button, which you can easily feel. So it's going to be interesting to see what they can do there. As for the size of the GS8, again, we're assuming there are going to be two models. Originally, it was rumored that Samsung would stick with 5.1 and 5.5 inches, but now we're starting to hear reports that the screens might actually get quite a bit bigger this year. In the past couple of days, it's been reported that the smaller of the two GS8s will have a body not much bigger than the GS7, but with a larger 5.7 inch screen, so very, very slim bezels. And the larger Galaxy S8 Plus might actually go as high as 6.3 inches, so a huge screen, but supposedly in a body that isn't that much bigger than the GS7 Edge. Now, it's worth not putting too much stock in what is effectively an unconfirmed drawing of a phone. Like Casemaker renders, these aren't always 100% confirmed. The people making them don't always know any more than the rest of us. But if this does happen, it's a huge deal, and obviously part of the larger trend towards very slim bezels that we're going to see in this generation of phones. Screen resolution is interesting as well. Originally, Samsung was rumoured to go all the way up to a 4K display in these phones, but instead it's looking like they might stick at 2K at Quad HD, but instead with a new pixel layout. Most AMOLED phones right now use 2 subpixels per pixel as a tiny coloured dots of light that make up each pixel, whereas RGB would step it all the way up to 3. That's a big deal for VR, also a big deal for text and other stuff on screen. Just generally everything's going to look sharper compared to earlier AMOLEDs, even though the resolution is the same. As for specs, Samsung is rumoured to split things between its own Exynos processors and Qualcomm's Snapdragon 835 based on region. You'd imagine the US would probably go with a Snapdragon, whereas global markets maybe would go with Exynos. So the 835 is basically a known quantity. It's the chip that's going to probably be in the vast majority of Android flagships this year. We haven't heard anything yet on the next generation of Samsung's Exynos chips beyond rumours and leaks, but it is rumoured to use the new ARM Mali G71 GPU. That's the chip we've already seen in Huawei's Mate 9. However, when Samsung uses it, it would almost certainly be built on a more efficient 10nm process and, according to the rumours, have more cores as well. And once again, a faster GPU is obviously a huge deal for VR. There is one very controversial hardware feature we've avoided talking about so far, and that's the Headphone Jack. Originally, it was rumoured that Samsung would copy Apple and remove the Headphone Jack from the Galaxy S8. That is now supposedly not happening. The more recent reports from Sam Mobile saying that Samsung will indeed include that Headphone Jack in the GS8. To me, that makes sense. If you're competing with the iPhone this year, the easiest differentiator to have is just to do what you were going to do anyway, include that headphone jack, and let people just plug their normal headphones in without resorting to using a ridiculous dongle. The camera is an area where there's huge competition right now among smartphone makers, and supposedly, if the leaked images are to be believed, Samsung will stick with a single camera design, so no crazy dual lens setup like Huawei or Apple. And if that's the case, it's likely we could be seeing mostly incremental changes in the GS8 compared to the GS7, so maybe a brighter lens, bigger pixels. That would make sense. So maybe don't be too surprised if, at least on paper, the GS7's camera looks a lot like the GS8's. Increasingly, the difference between a good camera and a great camera in a high-end phone is the processing anyway. We've already seen that from the Google Pixel. Part of the reason why Google has such a great camera is because of HDR+ and what it's able to do with processing there. So maybe look for software to make up some of that gap on the GS8. Speaking of software, we've already had a pretty good sneak peek at what the GS8 will look like on the software side thanks to the Galaxy S7's Nougat update. So you're looking at going from blues and teals into a much cleaner, whiter UI, much more minimalist than we've seen from Samsung in years past, and just a really, really nice evolution of what we've already seen on the Note 7 to begin with. But one important part of the software that's missing is Samsung's new AI assistant that's rumoured to be called Bixby. Kind of a weird name, but you could see why that would make sense. It's very unique, doesn't sound like anything else, would work really well potentially as an activation phrase. Supposedly it's going to be built off Samsung's acquisition of Viv last year, that's the AI company, and supposedly it will be context sensitive. We don't know a whole lot about it yet, but you could easily imagine that with that context awareness, you might be able to ask it questions based on what's on your screen, similar to what you can do with Google Assistant. AI is already emerging as one of the huge tech trends of 2017. Obviously, Amazon has a huge lead on a lot of people there. They're already bringing Alexa to phones, so it's going to be really interesting to see what's unique that Samsung can do in that field. So finally, release date. When are you going to be able to get your hands on a Galaxy S8? Now, previously Samsung has done its thing at Mobile World Congress, the trade show in Barcelona at the end of February. Now it's looking like it's probably going to wait a couple of months after that. And that's entirely understandable. If you're Samsung, maybe you want to take that extra month, make sure there are absolutely no issues with this phone after the whole Note 7 thing before putting it on sale. So maybe look for an early April event, mid-April launch. April 15th has already been rumoured as a release date. So lots to look forward to in the Samsung Galaxy S8. It's going to be one of the biggest releases of the year, and surely some surprises to come along the way as well. So subscribe, keep watching the site. We'll have much more as this phone approaches release. In the meantime, I'm out of here. See you next time.